What's up, Vortex Nation, and welcome to a new front-end segment we're adding to the good old Vortex Nation podcast. Man, we appreciate you guys. You take the time to watch, to listen, and to comment. And the comments are what we're talking about today. We're going to start highlighting a comment of the week. The commenter is going to receive one of these sweet Vortex Nation podcast hoodies. If you're watching on YouTube, I'm wearing it right now. Part 2 of this segment is going to be anything newsworthy going on at Vortex. So without further ado, let's get to the comment of the week. Today's is from @Flipmatize. Big shout out to Mark for the Warren G reference. I'm a longtime listener from the LBC since episode 1. You guys keep the videos rolling. Flipmatize, thank you so much for being a long-time listener. We sincerely appreciate it. You have impeccable taste in music. And I'm going to say, man, you put up with a lot over in the great state of California. Firearms can be difficult. Ammunition regulations can be difficult. Keep fighting the good fight. As far as news goes, we just launched the new Viper HD Riflescope series. Spoiler alert, you're going to hear about that in the episode you're going to be tuning into here in a few seconds. So without further ado, let's start the show.
If you told me, hey, I do the majority of my hunting in the upper Midwest or in the Northeast or even throughout the Carolinas down to Georgia, probably shorter shots than long, fantastic. Awesome optical quality, great feature set on board, conducive for success. And then you tell me, hey, I'll probably also go chase mule deer and pronghorn. Do I need to upscope? I'm not going to tell you need to.
What is up, everybody? Mark on the mic here. Mr. Ryan Muckenhirn across from me. It is a lovely Monday. Ryan, you're getting coffeeed up.
Need it.
You do need it. You had an early get-up this morning.
Indeed.
And the turkeys foiled you again.
I got to observe some very fascinating behavior.
You're always observing, mostly people.
This was turkeys.
This was turkeys,
yeah.
Though. Yeah. You like to analyze people.
Yeah.
It's like a hobby of yours.
It's a thing.
It's not what we're going to talk about today.
Not even a little
That's
bit.
something that I've observed of you, is how much you like to observe other people. Why don't we talk about some observations you've made over time talking to customers, you and I, for many, many years.
Yeah.
About choosing the right rifle scope for them, or how to choose the right rifle scope.
Not to derail this any further, Mark, but how it is that you are able to bring those intros from the chaos of the universe into shape.
I would say that was a toughie, and that was a loose that was a loose connection there.
Particles on opposite ends of the galaxy. Mark brings them together to form a planetary body.
That is a very high compliment, considering I was thinking maybe we should just start this over.
No, not at all. We're rolling.
Ryan.
Mark.
When I'm looking at a rifle scope, the first thing that I would ask myself or somebody else is, what are you going to use it for?
Big piece of the pie. And
I would say, and I get guilty of this myself, when I say, well, maybe this, maybe that, this could happen. I might have to shoot this far. And then sometimes I've ended up with something that's outside the scope of what I actually need.
I've seen it.
Now, in the same breath, I'll say you don't want to enter the field undergunned and potentially miss out on an opportunity had you, added some of those considerations or factored them in to your rifle scope selection.
Sure.
But would you concur, the number one question, what are you going to use it for?
Yes.
And I guess in this case, what style or type of hunting?
Yeah.
Yeah. When you talk to customers, what, and maybe it just runs the gamut, but what would be, keeping that question in mind, like, how does your discussion go with them?
Generally speaking, a guy or gal is going to email in or call in and say, hey, I'm going on my first mule deer hunt, first elk hunt. I'm hunting in northern Wisconsin, Michigan, Minnesota. They'll give me like a species or a geographical region in which we're going to be occupying. And a lot of times they'll tell me which firearm they're going to be using. You know, I've got a Savage 308 or a Tikka 6.5 PRC or a Christensen 270, something along those lines.
Well, and you bring up a very important thing. What are you going to be using it for, but what are you putting it on?
Yeah.
That's like...
And so it's not uncommon that we get a very general question like, I'm looking for a new scope for my rifle. Please help. Signed, Don Johnson or something like that. And then usually what we'll do is we'll start that line of questioning like, hey, thank you for reaching out. What are you looking to mount, or what are you looking to do with this? Like, what is the objective with this rifle scope? What is it going on?
I'm going to interject here.
Yeah.
Have you been watching Miami Vice again?
I don't know that I've ever seen Miami Vice.
Don Johnson? I'm pretty sure he's like the main character.
I thought it was one of those generic Acme names.
I mean, it could be. Maybe it's common.
Like a fun alliteration.
I wonder how many Don Johnsons there are out there.
A few.
My grandfather, Bob Johnson.
Not Don.
Not Don. I'm sorry.
But that line of questioning, what are we using it for? What are we putting it on? And then I'll go a couple steps further throughout the conversation. Like inevitably, it's going to flow that way. Some people will tell me right off the bat, like, I'm looking for attribute or feature set X, Y, or Z. My budget is A, B, or C. But I'll ask those questions too. Is there a particular attribute of a rifle scope or a feature set in a rifle scope that you're looking for? And what is your budget for this new build? And with that, we can usually get a good picture of what's going to be kind of a best fit for that application. And then once we get into the flow of conversation, that's when I start instilling my biases into everything.
Of talking them out of magnification.
Generally speaking.
Yeah, that's when I have to interject and talk them into just not a lot more, just a little bit more.
It just depends. But mostly it doesn't. It just depends.
It always depends. Cost always a factor.
Big time.
And so I think it's just like one of those limiting factors. Like what is your budget?
Yeah, and I'm not afraid to throw that question on the table because I think it's very important. If somebody's coming to us because they're looking to invest in a new optic, these things are generally expensive and their hunt is going to be somewhat costly. I never want to say have somebody ask what's the best scope for an application and just immediately throw them to the ultra premium and overwhelm them, or conversely throw them to the entry level and underwhelm them. I want to make sure that expectation is met. And so I do ask that question up front. What are you looking to invest in this? Because it is absolutely a talking point.
Well, and I think for the sake of this discussion, Ryan, that was a little bit of foreshadowing because our optics run the gamut from what I always say our entry point, which I wouldn't call entry level, to optics that compete at that true top tier alpha class, feature rich, all the things, right? And you're talking about, both ends of that spectrum.
From 200 to 2,000.
But we kind of have a new middle ground sweet spot.
Oh, we're just going to talk about it?
Well, I want to do, just throw it out there. This is part of our debut of a revamped Riflescope series that's been in the Vortex lineup for a really, really long time.
Absolutely.
Because it's a really good rifle scope. We made it better.
Mm-hmm.
Should we just say what it is and then get to it eventually?
Do you want to go on 3 or do you just want to blurt it out?
You do the honors.
Introducing the new Viper HD line of rifle scopes from Vortex Optics.
This is exciting.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Long time coming.
Real long time coming.
Yeah.
Lots of development, lots of testing. I think this is the Viper series itself. Now we're just going to talk about it for a little bit. Has been a favorite for you and I, and a lot of folks out there. And so it truly is exciting seeing this next generation.
Absolutely.
Okay, where were we before I derailed us?
How to pick.
Yeah.
It's a very ambiguous question mark. Perhaps we should paint scenarios.
That might be the best course of action. On the table, we have different variants, different series of Riflescopes.
A smattering.
That, yes, are great for different scenarios.
Absolutely.
Some of them, a lot of scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you want to start there, Ryan?
Mark, why don't you give me a scenario?
Okay. We get this question a lot, Ryan. What's the best scope to hunt deer? Pretty broad question. Again, it gets into, where are you going? What type of deer are you chasing?
Well,
What's the landscape like?
Let's role play, Mark.
I'm going to say, man, I live in the Midwest.
Yep.
I'm looking for a good rifle scope to hunt deer. I mean, oftentimes my max shot would be 250 yards.
Sure.
Inside 300. Looking for something solid build quality, good optics. Don't necessarily want to break the bank. Am I describing anything? Are you able to pick one out on the table here, Ryan?
What is your max budget?
Man, I'd say, definitely less than $500.
Okay. And what kind of rifle's going on?
Man, it's going on just my dad's Remington .6 that he gave me.
Very good. Well, with that being said, a couple of important things to note. 30-06 has a fair amount of recoil. I want to get you into a rifle scope that's got adequate eye relief. I'm not concerned about the mechanical build quality of anything in our line. We can absolutely mount that, any optic that we make, on an .6. Of course, contingent on quality rings and bases used and proper mounting procedure. At that budget, the one I am gravitating toward the most actually is our entry line, the Crossfire 2. I'm going to give you two magnification ranges to look at. Knowing that you are in the upper Midwest here, I was just hunting this morning, in fact, not for deer, but for turkeys. And at any point in time, I could have been in timber and had a 40-yard opportunity. And I was sitting a field edge and could have had that 300-yard shot that you had talked about as your max envelope, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
had you been hunting deer, yeah.
Yeah. 3 to 9 by 40 or 4 to 12 by 44. I think both of these play well in this scenario, reason being, on the low end of their magnification range, 3 and 4x respectively, we have very gratuitous field of view. If we're in timber, generally speaking, it's a little bit darker than if we're out in the open. As we demagnify, we're allowing more light through the system, and we're going to be able to have better and more positive target ID. This example is a 3 to 9. It happens to be the V-Plex reticle. You had mentioned right off the bat that you could approach that 250, 300-yard mark. Not that you couldn't do it with the V-Plex reticle with a Clever Zero, but I would be more inclined to recommend our dead hold BDC reticle, giving you those 4 holdover points beneath the center intersection that using a simple ballistics calculator we could calculate. We could figure out exactly where those lines intersect with your trajectory downrange. Now, between a 3 to 9 and a 4 to 12, personally, I would be a little more partial to the 3 to 9, knowing that max window is about 300 yards. The 9 power will absolutely get you there, and it'll do it with a little bit better low light performance on its bottom end and a little bit wider field of view on its bottom end, where we're actually likely to be engaging more of our targets, right?
Mm-hmm.
So a very simple staple, 3 to 9, 4 to 12, right in that pocket. I like the Crossfire 2 specifically for its eye relief. It is a forgiving optic to mount on a lot of different rifles. And if I do have a customer, say, come into the showroom or call in or write in, and they do mention a caliber like 30-06 or larger on the recoil scale, it's generally the Crossfire that I pick first.
You mentioned the BDC reticle, which the example we have here is the Plex reticle, but it's going to subtend really well with an .6 type bullet trajectory. We can figure it out for any bullet. But generally just off the rack, you ought to be fairly close. Always want to validate in the field.
Absolutely.
To the distances that you intend on shooting. 1-inch tube on the Crossfire.
Correct.
Oftentimes, a person likely has 1-inch rings on their rifle in the scenario. Not always. And I'd say 30 millimeter tubes are mean, more and more and more and more common every day.
I'd say by now they're the standard. Maybe not by total volume sold, because we sell a heck of a lot of Crossfire 2s and Diamondback rifle scopes.
Mm-hmm.
But these days, it would seem that the standard by which everybody is now reading and investigating and searching it is 30 millimeter.
Mm-hmm. And I guess, in the same breath, what I was saying, like a person is likely to have those 1-inch rings. Maybe they're just as likely to have 30 millimeter rings, and that could drive them into a particular Riflescope series because they're like, well, I get this, but then I'd have to buy new rings, so then I'm actually spending, a little extra money. Like, might as well just go with the rings that I have and maybe spend a little extra money on the scope. So, okay. We did a podcast a little while back, Ryan, on low-power variables for hunting.
Sure.
We have one of those on the table here.
Viper PST.
We recently did a podcast with a young gal, Izzy, who shot a Wisconsin bull elk. Pretty cool story.
Very cool.
I believe that's the scope she was using?
She was crazy about it.
Yeah.
Yep. She basically walked in, gave me a bullet list of why she wanted an LPVO for that particular application, infallible logic.
Now, I'll say, if you haven't listened to that podcast, very, what's the word I'm like, accomplished or proficient shooter.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't like, oh, yeah, I practiced on the paper plate in the backyard. She's a precision rifle shooter, very knowledgeable about just shooting, technique, equipment. And you think, oh, precision rifle, like, long-range stuff, right? Or oftentimes. And she goes with the 1-6.
Mm-hmm.
Because
she wanted to exploit field of view and fast handling on that rifle. So she knew the area well that she was going to be in. And she also said, hey, it's not likely that I would take this particular optic pronghorn or mule deer hunting, which she does with the same rifle, potentially even in the same season. She has a different system for that, where she's going to be in more open terrain. She's going to want and will pursue a little bit more magnification and kind of technical feature set in that rifle scope. But for that particular hunt, she was very likely to be hunting field edges, first light, last light, and potentially heavy timber. And by heavy timber, I mean thick as thieves timber. And she wanted that extra wide field of view that an LPVO is going to give us. So you demagnify to 1x, and it's like there is no scope. There's just a floating reticle in the middle of your field of view. And it's a both eyes open affair, very quick. Think analog to red dot, but you also have the ability to zoom up if you needed to. And she also knew that she could likely be hunting the edge of an egg field or like a clear cut in the timber, and she might have up to a 200-yard shot, which 6X is more than adequate for, especially in the hands of a seasoned and accomplished shooter as Izzy is. So she picked the 1-6, and she picked it right off the bat. Like, I showed her other options. She was otherwise disinterested in it. She had kind of made up her mind from the get-go that the 1-6 was going to be the best fit for her. Ended up shooting that bull at, I think, right around 80 yards.
Something like that, yeah.
And right at last light. And there was a lot of other elk moving in and about the area, so field of view was very important.
Sure.
Positive target ID. She wasn't looking to have too much magnification, pull up and just see nothing but shoulder blade. So she demagged, killed that bull exactly as she had kind of predicted she'd do it.
Right.
And the 1-6 was, I think, the best tool for that job.
Now, she had that on a 7 MMO8 bolt gun. We see folks putting LPVOs on bolt guns a fair amount. Like you think of like even European style driven game perhaps. From a firearm platform perspective, and we've talked about LPVOs a lot, low power variable optic. Dude, you put that on an AR, and you've got something that's magical, yes, for a vast array of scenarios, from hunting to defense to anything under the sun. Let's talk about how an LPVO shines if you have an AR that you want to hunt with.
Sure. So all the same reasons, right? Demagnification, 1x, both eyes open affair, lightning fast. Again, looking at the top end of our LPVO line, which technically we have a Crossfire 2 that gives you a 4x, which I probably mount more of those on slug guns, muzzle loaders, and lever guns than I do ARs these days.
Yeah.
But like a 1 to 4, 1 to 6, 1 to 8 LPVO, or 1 to 10 if you wanted, you're about at the limit of the cartridge's capability from a hunting perspective at the magnification range of 6 when we start thinking about positive target ID. So personally, I'd comfortably shoot a 1 to 6, in a hunting scenario to about 200 or 300 yards, depending on the cartridge that I'm shooting it on. If I'm using, say, a 223 for deer, I'm probably not going to go over 100 yards, maybe a little bit further. Everything's got to be just right. We're using a very marginal cartridge for that size of game animal.
Mm-hmm.
So 6x at 100 yards is a cakewalk.
You're picking, number one, we talked about shot distance. You're talking about shot angle.
Yep.
As far as the position of the deer towards you, you're being very selective about the shot that you're taking. And if you are and you execute that shot well, it should do the job sufficiently.
Yeah. Same to be said with 300 AAC, 6 ARC, 6.5 Grendel. If there's a 30 Remington AR rolling around out there, my hat's off to you.
Bullet selection.
Yeah. It complements the capability of the platform with the cartridges it's conventionally chambered in quite handily. So fast handling characteristics of the rifle, which we've all become accustomed to with ARs. And then again, magnification appropriate for about the top end of the cartridge performance, like envelope. So with respect to yardage or distance that we'd be shooting anyway. So I think they're brilliant there. I also feel that way on like a lever gun. So we mount a lot of 1 to 6s on 444 Marlins, 4570s, 450 Marlins. We don't see a lot of those running around. On bolt guns chambered in straight wall cartridges like 450 Bushmaster, 350 Legend, things like this. They play very nicely there. They complement the rifle, again, handling characteristics and where we would typically be using a gun like that. So Taylor, for instance, who's been on the podcast before, he's got a Marlin that he's got set up, a lever gun. He's got a 1 to 6 on it. I have a bolt.
What's it chambered in?
4570.
4570.
Yeah. I've got a bolt action 12 gauge, a Browning A-bolt that I use when I go back to Minnesota to hunt deer. I've got a 1 to 6 on it. Just famously functional. So I might have a shot at, I think the closest deer I killed in Minnesota in the past 10 years is probably 32 yards. I actually did that without a scope. That was with an iron-sighted gun in a muzzleloader season. But that would not be an atypical shot opportunity. And I've pushed that as far as about 160, 170 yards. And again, 1 to 6, perfect for it.
Talked a little bit about deer, but switching gears to like something like hogs.
Sure.
AR is incredibly popular.
Very.
Low power variable is incredibly popular. And I think one of the reasons, number one, I mean, they go hand in hand, right? They work really well together. In a situation where you're chasing hogs, it's not that necessarily that one opportunity like, oh man, I got this crack at a deer and knocked it down and, tags filled for the season.
Yep.
You might have multiple hogs in front of you that you're able to engage in short order. They might start close, and depending on when you stop shooting, they might be a little bit further out. Sure. So, again, you can, like you said, they're incredibly fast, but you can zoom in. They can be very precise as well. You certainly can't turn your nose up at a low-power variable in hunting applications.
Highly functional.
Depending on what you're doing.
Yeah. Not what I'm going to tell you. Head out to Kansas, Nebraska, Wyoming, Colorado, Montana for your next pronghorn hunt. But you could, just might not be optimal.
For that, Ryan.
Correct.
We might want something akin to these new Viper HDs.
Mark, I'm glad you said something.
We've got a couple on the table here.
Yep. Really good fleshed out representations of the line in entirety. So in the new HD line, we're going 2 to 10, 3 to 15, 5 to 25. And there's in the 3 to 15 and 5 to 25, a couple different variations depending on what you're going to be using them for. So that is exposed elevation turret versus capped, first focal plane versus second, MOA versus MRAD, etc. But we've got options, right?
We do have options.
Yes.
And somewhere in here is likely the option that will fit your needs.
The Goldilocks solution.
Let's talk about this new 2 to 10. You love the 2 to 10 magnification range.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what you like about that magnification range, and let's talk about this optic in particular.
Sure. So this is a new Viper HD 2 to 10. This is it was the slated replacement for my very, very favorite Viper HS 2.5 to 10.
How many of those are you going to have to replace now?
16. It's kind of a deal. And I'm not saying...
It's a whole thing.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that I'm going to, because I don't know that I can necessarily afford to, and that Riflescope for so many years has solved every problem I've ever had in the field. So I don't think I'm going to be offloading them or off-mounting them or dismounting. That's the word I'm looking for.
I said that in jest.
Yeah. But this is a very compelling optic for a lot of different reasons. And so I want to back up a little bit, though, and talk about kind of why that particular magnification range and I get along so well. Part of it is what I'm very accustomed to. So I grew up in central Minnesota. I hunted deer in the very northwest corner of the state, not quite all the way to the top, but northwest corner of the state. The furthest shot I am aware of in that hunting camp, it's like 120 yards maybe across a clear cut. And so the consideration of magnification is pretty low on the totem pole of things to worry about necessarily, because 120 yards is not a terribly far distance. So I grew up shooting lower magnifications on the whole, right? Never was exposed to the need for more, I suppose, until I started predator hunting. And when I got big into that, and I bought my first real predator rifle. My dad had one. He had a Remington 700 ADL and 223, which he put a 6 to 18 on because his buddy told him you got to have that much magnification for hunting coyotes. So when I got my first 223, I did the same thing. I put a big magnification scope that started with a 6 because I was positive that was a prerequisite for success. I was also positive that you could only hunt coyotes at night, it would seem. Magnification, tall ranges, and low light do not go well together. The more you magnify, the worse light gets from the user's perspective, and you end up taking several steps backwards. So I start calling coyotes at night under moonlight and with snow, and 6X is tough when it's dark out. And by dark, I mean it's like midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning. And even 6X was a challenge. You certainly got it done on a very bright night with very good snowpack. It's a shootable solution, and it works great when all the stars align. But it really is a lot.
Well, conversely, though, I'd say just talking about this situation, or maybe not similar, but if you're like, oh, I'm hunting South Dakota and I'm day calling, that Riflescope might have been a great solution for you.
Sure. What I then come to realize is that if I was successful in fooling a coyote to come in, which not a great success rate, maybe I'd see a coyote 1 every 10 sets.
It's about average.
Maybe I'd kill a coyote 1 every 20 to 25. A lot of times they were under 100 yards. Like they're coming to the call. And so now 6X is a fair amount of magnification at a moving target, generally, at tight quarters. I started daytime calling more and more and started seeing this trend and pattern and immediately pivoted to a Riflescope that had a low range of 2.5 and 3.5, depending on which gun I was running. And that sealed the deal for me. That was the majority of the rifle work that I had done until, I should say, other than deer hunting, which is kind of the same thing, but until I had started hunting the West. So long story short, I became very accustomed to that magnification range. I, on a number of occasions, had coyotes that would hang up at a distance. And if I was shooting a scope that was, in a 2.5 to 8, 3.5 to 10 range of magnification, I was still able to, I think easily take that coyote if he busted me at 250 or 300, or if he got a little spooky and sat down, like no sweat. So I stuck with it. And then I started hunting the West, and I started hunting mule deer and pronghorn pretty routinely, Western whitetails as well, and just carried that over and was very pleased with it. Fast forward several years, I get introduced to Vortex. This is even before I started here, and I came across the 2.5 to 10 in the HS and PST form.
Mm-hmm.
And first the PST, then the HS, I should say. And absolutely fell in love with the optical system. And by that, I mean the length of the optic or physical size, the weight, the optical quality, and the feature set that I was afforded with those product lines at their price. And quickly converted the other brand of Riflescope that I was running primarily at that time to the Vortex system. And by the time I got here in 2014, I think I had between 4 and 6 of the 2.5 to 10s, and I was outfitting them in as many different systems as I possibly could. In the West, I never found it to be a hindrance. Again, I was accustomed to shooting a top end of 10x by that point in time, and I loved everything else about it, the weight, the balance, the feel, the fit, the finish. And I just never moved from that position like wholeheartedly. I've run other optics, right? I've run higher magnifications. I've even run lower magnifications, but by and large, I've stuck with that. And for me personally, fast forwarding all these years, I've been with Vortex just shy of 10 of this podcast recording. And if I look at all the shots that I've taken in the West, yes, I've had some outliers. I've had some that, are over that even 500-yard mark. But by and large, the majority of them are between 200 and 300 yards and about right in the middle, about 250 on an average. 10X does it handily. So not only am I selecting an optic appropriate for the application and distances that I would engage it, but also to complement the handling characteristics of the rifle that I like to shoot, the cartridges that I like to shoot, and then that magnification range, the optical qualities of the optics within there, what I want out of an image. I want great low light performance. I want gratuitous field of view. I don't want to be over magnified to lose any of those attributes. I want enough magnification that I have positive target ID when I'm downrange and can take that shot. And I think about the furthest critter I ever shot it was a poke. It was 532 yards.
That's a poke, yeah.
Yep. And I remember in my mind's eye what 10X looks like at 532 yards. And I could tell you everything about that deer. Absolutely everything. And I was shooting a high recoiling cartridge. It was a 300 Weatherby. And because of that field of view, pulled the trigger, lost that critter in recoil, came back through, watched that critter tumble down the hill.
Gotcha.
Big field of view. Yep. Plenty of magnification. So I've stuck with it. This optic, compared to the HS counterpart that it is replacing, we've doubled down on the optical quality. And I was very pleased with the HS. It is my most recommended scope. This has taken its place.
Yeah.
Right. So we've upped the ante on optical quality by a good margin. It is absolutely brilliant. And I'm not even just saying that as an employee and representative of the company. Like, all biases aside, this thing is beautiful. We've added illumination. This is typically not something that I'm actively seeking in a rifle scope, but many of our customers are, and it's intelligent illumination. It's not overbearing. It's not too dim. It's not too bright. It's user selectable, of course. You can run the gambit of illumination power, and it's very simple. Just the center of the reticle, the part that matters the most.
Well, and I really like how it's integrated into the left side of the turret housing there. It's almost recessed a little bit, push button, just very clean, elegantly done, functional. I appreciate that.
Yeah. For me, where this is going to come into play, the illumination part, is on the low range of the magnification. So between 2 and 4. When I'm hunting heavy timber, tight quarters, this is brilliant. Oh, on tight quarters, the 2.5 to 10, I was with you in Missouri, and I shot a white-tailed deer at 11 yards.
Oh yeah.
And I shot that deer with a Viper HS 2.5 to 10, and at 2x or 2.5 on that particular optic at 11 yards, I had everything about that deer that I needed to, one, bring that rifle up in a quick manner. I was in a ladder stand, and she came below me. Bring that up, positive target ID, positive shot placement, perfect. Same scope, 532 yards on my longest shot. So very versatile solution.
All of the, or I shouldn't say all, but since you brought up Illumination.
Yeah.
In the Crossfire series, there are select models that do have illumination,
Yes.
if that is something that is important to you. I think both you and I don't put a major precedence on it, but it is a nice to have. And I won't turn, if done right, like I believe that it is, like in these new Viper HDs, I won't turn my nose up at.
No, certainly not. And it's not something you have to use. You can use an illuminated rifle scope without the illumination active.
Mm-hmm.
There's no visible difference to the user other than there's not a bright red center.
I was hunting bears in Idaho, and bear came out at last light. It was a black phase black bear, and that was a time when I was like, it was nice to have, I clicked the old illumination on, and I was like, okay, I like that.
A little bit more about the optic. It added a marginal amount of weight, about an ounce, to its predecessor. Retains a capped elevation and capped windage turret. So this is kind of a low tech, no frills version, right? There's no exposed elevation turret to manipulate, or depending on how you're using it, worry about.
Mm-hmm.
If you're worried about inadvertent rotation. Same on the windage. It's a very compact rifle scope. This is going to be a fantastic fit on my very favorite Kimber. It's going to be a fantastic fit on some of my very favorite Tikas. In fact, I used this rifle scope and one of my very favorite Tikas to take 2 white-tailed deer this year in Wisconsin.
This is true.
My first deer opener.
I still find that so hard to believe.
This is a really sweetheart, and truly, I think, kind of the Swiss Army knife of the line. If you told me, hey, I do the majority of my hunting in the upper Midwest or in the Northeast, or even throughout the Carolinas down to Georgia, on the eastern side of the state or country, where you're going to have probably shorter shots than long, fantastic. Awesome optical quality, great feature set on board, conducive for success. And then you tell me, hey, I'll probably also go chase mule deer and pronghorn. Do I need to upscope? I'm not going to tell you need to, because you can do it with this.
So I would say, yes, you certainly can. I was going to bring up the same thing. Phenomenal optic for Western hunting. I would say, my goodness, when I started hunting, Ryan, I remember when, it's like, 3 to 9 was the standard. Then you started to see some 10 power scopes, and you're like, oh man, that's pretty.
One more.
That's pretty hot. And then you saw some 4 to 12s and things like that. But I guess where I'm going with that is this will do everything you need it to do. If you are going to go through the process of getting your ballistic data to dial elevation for longer range shots, then we have scopes for that too.
Sure.
If you don't plan on doing that, this is, even me, and I'm a fan of magnification, this is where I would land. Sure. Likely where I would land. Thank goodness, though.
You've got options.
You've got options. And this next one we're going to talk about, again, this is in the new Viper HD series. This is a 3 to 15 by 44. Now, size, weight-wise, not a giant difference between this and the 2 to 10, so you're not making a huge sacrifice there. For me personally, 3 on the low end is a fantastic low end, and I'm also gaining 5 on the top end of magnification. So I still have that low end functionality for closer range shots, faster shots in the timber. But, oh man, I can crank it up to 15 if I want to engage a target that's further out. It has a capped windage turret, which I like, because I'm not going to dial personally. And I think a lot of folks are this way. You're not going to dial for wind in the field when you're hunting. I know some people that do, so I'm not going to say that it doesn't happen. But it does have a locking exposed elevation turret for dialing. So after you've gone through the process of getting your ballistic data, maybe you've input it in your Razor GB rangefinder, and you're ready to rock. This, to me, is just an absolutely phenomenal do-all solution for everything from your Midwest whitetails to, shooting deer and elk, bears, at extended but responsible ranges.
Yeah, and I agree. And
some of that responsible range depends on the individual.
It does. Individual cartridge capabilities, bullet technology, etc.
This person has generally taking those things into consideration.
Sure. So as Mark had mentioned, lift to unlock elevation turret. You might see this oddly familiar to our Razor HD LHT, which we also have on the table. That, I would say, the LHT gave us our best hunting turret and one of our best turret designs, period. Which now that lift to unlock technology, the rev stop, zero stop system,
which is so simple to set.
It has been incorporated in several models outside of the hunting line even, and very useful, very intelligent, and robust. That's the biggest thing. Easy and robust and intelligent. So if, as Mark had mentioned, you are that versatile terrain hunter, and you might find yourself here in south central Wisconsin, northern Minnesota, and then also Wyoming, Colorado, Montana, Idaho, etc. All these places where having that magnification range and having a feature set like an exposed elevation turret would be useful. Yes, excellent option. I'm an LHT user. I've got a couple of those. I've got them on select rifles. Generally, if I have a customer asking me, like, where is that optic most appropriate, or like the new Viper HD 3-15, I'm going to say my rifles that I have set up predominantly for Western hunting, that I'm selecting that optical system and mechanical system for those, specifically the mechanical system, for the attribute of dialing. If I'm likely to encounter longer shots, or if I'm in a unit that game is pretty sparse and the shot opportunity may be the shot opportunity, like one of one. I want to leverage that level of technical capability to do that. Not that you can't shoot extraordinarily accurately off your reticle. You absolutely can. This is a big confidence booster for me. For some folks, if you've never twisted a turret like this, you might have a little bit of anxiety. I'll tell you, though, if you can turn the radio up on your pickup or your car, you can run an elevation turret. It's pretty straightforward. And so this is a really good marriage on faster, flatter shooting cartridges in larger spaces. But because it locks, as you had mentioned, Mark, effectively it's exactly the same as the capped version. It's just quicker to get to your data if you need it. You do not have to be dependent on the turret. You can use the reticle. You can use a clever zero distance. That's fine. Illumination as standard. In the 3-15 model, we then add parallax adjustment as well. And if you're familiar with the Viper HS 4-16x44, 4-16x50, or the Viper HSLR, this specific unit here is really the next gen Viper HSLR. And really, really clever design. Still pretty trim. They're coming just a shade over 20 ounces, and really an appropriate selection, like I said, for those flatter shooting, precedence on longer range accuracy capable systems.
Well, and I guess what I like about it, I can use this rifle scope like I would use the 2-10, right? But I have these things at my disposal to, again, it's just another arrow in my quiver.
It can be, yeah,
of capabilities in the field, and I've been in several situations where you're glassing. I'm thinking of spring bears now. You're glassing across a canyon, and you're either gonna you get an opportunity in the animal. Well, you're either gonna shoot across the canyon, and kill them at 4, 5, 6, or you're going to take the time to go across the canyon, hopefully relocate this animal, and shoot them at, 50 yards, 20, because of visibility. Also, you're going to risk spooking that animal. So if you do have the capabilities with the equipment and your personal shooting, I just think you're going to increase your opportunities. You're going to turn things that previously weren't an opportunity into a very solid opportunity.
Absolutely, yeah.
Those took me a very long time to get there.
That's fine, and with not a ton of risk either. So 15 isn't a tremendous amount of magnification. So there's not as many risks as you might find with a higher magnified optic in a general hunting application. It's an appropriately powered optic. It's not over magnified. And again, all the other attributes, size, weight, optical quality on board, feature set like the illumination, side parallax adjustment, etc. This makes for a very, very, very versatile system. And it's likely I'm going to be running a couple of these too on a couple of select rifles. Mark, I know that this is going to be your everything.
I mean, previously, I had, I love the LHT. Mm-hmm. The Razor HD LHT, and I will always love that scope, and I will continue to run that scope. I look at this, though, and I go, man, that's got a lot of what I love about the LHT. And again, we go back to that big cost component that we started with. You're getting an incredible amount of features and performance in something that's not going to hit you as hard in your pocketbook. And there's still going to be folks that the LHT, and we're going to talk about the LHT in a little bit, I'm sure, is still the right choice. I'm a big fan of that scope. I've hunted that scope, and that's the one that I look at and I go, that is the do-all. It's a big brother. Mm-hmm. There's a 5 to 25.
Yes.
Viper HD. You got
this
it
year.
Right there. A little bit longer.
Considerably, yep. We get into a larger format optic. We're going to, of course, add a little bit of weight with that because we've increased physical dimension by a considerable amount.
Same feature set, mm-hmm. I guess outside of the magnification, capped windage, left side parallax, cleanly integrated illumination, exposed elevation turret that locks for dialing your long-range shots, rev stop zero system. Optically, again, an improvement over the current Viper
HSLR, HST.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on this guy? Who's this one for?
For a hunting optic in this magnification class, I would personally leave this for the open plains and desert region. Mm-hmm. And for me, again, personally, that would be a non-negotiable. This is not an optic you're going to find on my hunting rifles for hunting anywhere in the Midwest, or really anywhere that has any kind of tree cover or visual obscuration to my field of view. This is an open country optic. And I would say it's probably a little more niche. It's in general more magnification than I'd ever personally run, but in big country, this could be extraordinarily useful, right? And especially on small target opportunities. Now, I've never hunted Coues deer. Mark, you have. I imagine that this could be a stellar tool when you're looking at a whitetail that weighs between 80 and 100 pounds, that you nicking an ocotillo or a creosote bush or a cholla cactus that you didn't quite make out, a small target, and you need to tuck a bullet into the right spot, the assistive magnification could definitely be useful when you're at longer distances. I also find this to be a very useful hybrid optic for a shooter who maybe spends equal time shooting long-range steel and hunting with the same platform. But I would say a PSA on big magnification hunting scopes, use them wisely. Anytime you go up in magnification, you expose yourself to a couple of risks, and that's namely low light performance and diminished field of view. And that is a function of physics. So as you go higher, you're going to diminish levels in both, and it can be a challenging optic to hunt, like I said, in the timber, basically. So this is an open country optic. I'm thinking the plains, the prairies, the desert. And for that, it could be extraordinarily useful. Or if you're a shooter who wants the the versatility in a target/hunting rifle, because a lot of these new, I'm going to air quote them and call them precision-esque rifles that are coming out, are intended to be dual purpose. It's not uncommon, where I have a customer that comes in the door with a rifle configured in a full chassis with a carbon fiber barrel and all the whiz-bang stuff that weighs like 8 pounds and is totally huntable.
Mm-hmm.
That shooter might spend the majority of his or her time on a flat range, but is going to take that same system hunting in those big spaces, 5 to 25. I think the first focal plane especially is a prerequisite for a hunting optic in big magnification, if it's going to be used for hunting specifically. Big game. On a prairie dog town or rock chuck shooting, things like that, second focal plane would be fine. But for big game, I'm gonna push you hard towards pursuing the first focal plane option.
Why is that?
So
because I do feel differently about that.
Okay, so I'll give you a real life scenario. First and second focal plane, if you're not intimately familiar with them, a first focal plane reticle will subtend or measure appropriately throughout the magnification range. So from 5 to 25, your reticle's values on your vertical and horizontal axes do not change. So if they're structured to be, 1/2 MRAD apart from each other, regardless of whether you're on 5 or regardless of whether you're on 25, doesn't matter. A second focal plane reticle will have a denoted subtension magnification. On, say, the 2 to 10, for instance, it's 10x. That's when your reticle subtends at 1.5, 4.5, 7.5, and 11 M away from the center, right? And your dead hold BDC is, quote, accurate as intended. Now, we could easily calculate what the values are at any given magnification range, but we're making some assumptions for the shooter that if your target is far enough away that it lends 10x and you plan on being or using your reticle rather to hold over and find one of those hash marks, that subtension magnification is going to be the highest. On the 5 to 25, it's going to be not at 25, so it's going to be a little bit lower. But if you're going to shoot off your reticle, that's the magnification you have to be on. And again, we make a couple of assumptions so I can kind of back myself into and out of this corner. If it's first light, last light, and you're at 20x magnification, and you're going to shoot off your reticle, it may be impossible to see that subject, that target. I had a deer that I killed in northwestern South Dakota a few years ago that it was 10x was the threshold. And I had my Viper at that. He was close enough that I didn't need 10x to kill him. And I didn't kill him on 10x. I backed off. But that was it. Like any more magnification than that, I would have had 0 target ID. And so if you are going to go in the field and your reticle is going to be your primary means of holdover or rather distance engagement and bullet placement, the first focal plane is going to give you a ton of leniency in that you can back down to a magnification to allow enough light through the system that you can accurately hold the reticle and take the shot. To counter this, you can use the turret, and then it doesn't matter. You could dial the optic back to 5x as long as you know your data, input your data into your turret and execute the shot, because you're shooting out the center of the reticle. And on a first or second focal plane reticle, doesn't matter. Your center never changes. So if you're zeroed at 100, 200 yards, whatever, it's always there at the middle. But that risk with second focal plane, and again, this is my opinion, is in low light scenarios, you are somewhat stymieing yourself because you have to be on that denoted magnification range to execute that shot. And it can be impossible to do.
So for me and how I would use a rifle scope like this, I would gravitate towards the second focal plane version. I like having that bolder reticle. If I'm going to shoot at a longer distance, I am going to dial. I'm going to have all the pre-work done. I'm going to lace the target, and I'm going to take the time to dial, whether it costs me that opportunity or not. Generally, at these longer distances, you do have a little bit more time, and you probably should have some time to execute a shot, just because there can be a lot going on. In some ways, there can be less going on because you might have an animal that's very relaxed. You could have a critter at 100 yards and have maybe a lot more going on. Maybe it's alert. Maybe it's, starting to run. Maybe it's getting nervous, right? So I think sometimes shooting game at those longer distances actually affords you a better opportunity,
it can.
In the hole. So I'm going to dial. I'm likely not going to be at the top end of or even approaching where that reticle is going to subtend. I'm likely not going to be shooting or taking that shot if the wind is such that it's like a really, really big consideration for me. So kind of removing those things, and also knowing that when I hunt, like even when you're hunting coos deer or something like that, you might get a faster shot at closer range. I just like having that bolder reticle, being able to crank it down to 5x. You can still engage, targets inside of 100 at 5x. You can do it. Is it as easy as 3? No. But and then also when approaching, hit game, I like to crank my optic to its lowest setting, and again have that widest field of view possible. I can argue myself out of that corner too and say we'll just turn the illumination on.
Yeah, and I come to that opinion, one, just based on personal use, but also I hear inevitably every year somebody, and probably more than one, hey, big buck, big bull, shot over his back 3 times. What happened? First focal plane or second focal plane rifle scope, and what magnification? Just generally speaking, the taller end of the magnification range, and in like a 5-25 like this, well, I was on 14 power because he was at 330 yards. And it's like, well, if you use your reticle, so safety's in place, right? If you're going to use a 5-25 second focal plane, know your turret. And everything else takes care of itself. For general hunting, my personal opinion, in that magnification range, anything, for me personally, anything over 15, I'm gonna lean on first focal plane as nearly a prerequisite for success.
Yeah, I would throw in there too, if you are maybe you have a kestrel or something like that, or however you're reading wind, but you have an accurate way of reading wind, or you are hunting with a person who's going to give you an accurate wind reading, then that first focal plane reticle does become more valuable to me, because now, yes, I might have dialed, but I don't have to be the top, at that top end of the magnification range to utilize a very calculated wind hold.
On a first focal plane.
On a first focal plane, yeah.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Correct.
Some kind of like countering what I said before there. I don't always have that though.
Correct. From a hybrid target and hunting option, big country. Excellent choice. I see a lot of varmints, especially like Pennsylvania, Idaho, Colorado, and then I'm going to lump in prairie dogging as well. Second focal plane preferential, because the reticle is actually, like, at its magnification range where it's subtended properly, thinner than a first focal plane. Not a ton, but at the center, just a tick. So you have a little bit more target ID on those little targets. So like a ground squirrel, a woodchuck or rock chuck, whatever the colloquial term is for them, or prairie dog, that second focal plane, by and large, that is the one that I sell the most of it. A lot of HSTs make it to prairie dog towns. And like this is going to be a slated replacement for that system, right? So
sure.
You're getting all the technical capability, plus you're getting the second focal plane reticle that is a bit finer at that magnification range for that tiny little target. So it'd be a phenomenal varminting scope.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up. I was thinking about that earlier, and then it got sidetracked there. But yeah, man, I'm pumped about these.
Oh yeah.
Like you said, both the 3 to 15 and the 5 to 25. If you've got an open landscape hunt, potentially some cross canyon shooting.
Well, Mark, to your point though, on the 3 to 15, I was with Pete this year when he took his first deer. He did it with a 3 to 15 LHT. We were hunting not the woods, but had the opportunity to hunt the woods, and I felt all as comfortable to give him that optic. If we would have selected a stand that we would have had, maybe a 125-yard shot, but more likely we're going to be hunting big timber, like deer trails through old growth oak, 3 to 15 would have been just fine.
Yep.
Down there. Turn it to 3X. Good to go.
I like it.
Yeah.
Going up from there, I guess, from price, optical quality, things like that, we have the LHT series.
Yes.
And a lot of the things that we talked about in the new Viper, I guess LRs, if you want,
Yeah.
They share common traits.
Yeah.
30 millimeter tube, again, exposed elevation turret for dialing, a left side parallax, illumination, capped windage turret. Optically, they're off the charts, and size and weight, they're off the charts too.
Yes. So this is that no holds barred approach, right? When we're looking to build, I mean, if you think about a rifle like the new Weatherby Mark V, the ultralight rigs that they're coming out with, the Christensen Arms guns, the Kimber Mountain Ascents of the world, the Proof Research guns, like these minimum weight, maximum potential systems. This is often who is looking at the LHT as a front runner. And again, not that the Viper HD 3 to 15 wouldn't do it, because I think it'd be a stellar complement, leave you money for rings, bases, and ammo left over.
Mm-hmm.
The LHT is for those, I need literally the minimum weight, maximum optical threshold possible. And that's the LHT. And, as is often the case in our line, we implement a technology like the lift to unlock, rev stop, zero stop system. We find it wildly successful, and then we integrate it into other lines. So a little cheat code for you. You're getting a lot of that performance you found previously in only the LHT, now in the Viper HD, and you're doing it at a better cost proposition. You're still getting better optics, lighter weight out of an LHT with those feature sets as standard. So I run LHTs, and I went over earlier why I make that selection. It's a lightweight rifle that I need big capability out of, and alpha class Formula One level optical quality, because I'm obsessed with optics first, and that's where an LHT comes into play and is infinitely useful. They're a very attractive rifle scope. I love how trim and svelte they are, and it's cool to think, knowing behind the curtain, like there's not much more you can take out from that airframe to make it much lighter before you start like compromising a whole bunch of stuff. It is a really, really cool package, and I just really appreciate what the guys in NPD and engineering came up with the LHT.
I mean, they're a masterpiece.
Yes.
I mean, in my opinion, they truly are, and to a lot of folks, they carry that masterpiece price tag along with them. The one that we have here, so this is the 3 to 15 second focal plane. You look at it, I'm going to compare it, kind of set it side by side here to the, the 3 to 15 in the Viper HD. And fairly comparable. I mean, definitely,
lengthwise.
Lengthwise, yeah.
Yeah.
Weight, the Viper's going to be a little bit heavier. Yep. Now I don't have, the brother to this LHT that I'm holding in my hands right now. If you're watching on YouTube, these also have rings on them. So some of these have rings on them. That just an FYI. There's a 4.5 to 22 by 50 in the same series that I don't have here. Like, I guess in some ways, other than the 50 millimeter bell, like if they were side by side, you'd be kind of hard pressed to tell.
Dimensionally nearly identical.
So I guess where I'm going with that, if you are the person that goes, man, I want first focal plane and I want that higher mag range, like I said, it's a 4.5 to 22, but I still am placing a precedence on size and weight. You're going to be able to do that with the 4.5 to 22 first focal plane version of the Razor HD LHT, where there's a little bit more of a discrepancy here between, you get into the Viper series and in the 3 to 15 and in the 5 to 25. So, nothing bad here, just things to think about when you're making your selection.
Yep. Again, you're leaning on the budget isn't so much of an issue, but the weight and the form factor and the optics that's the precedence. That is the paramount piece to that pie, and that's the LHT. Yeah.
Miss anything on those?
No, overall I've been just so delighted with that optical and mechanical system, and I'm, this is going to sound kind of silly. I'm really glad it's got to trickle down into the Viper.
Oh yeah.
Because if I'm being really honest, like as a hunter and shooter, the Viper has always been my bread and butter. And again, I own a couple of Razors, and I use them for what they are. I'm so excited to be able to give people that technology at a lower price point. And you're going to sacrifice zip. It's going to be outstanding. I don't want to downsell LHTs. I'm very happy to upsell Viper HDs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Somewhat of a what I would consider a hybrid scope, Ryan. This is where we really start bridging the gap of I'm holding a rifle scope here, so I can't do my air quotes tactical and hunting. This is a Strike Eagle 3 to 18 by 44. A very, again, functional magnification range. Size and weight, not
undue.
No. Feature rich. All the things that we, and
massive value.
And a ton of travel. Yeah. To me, when you're talking about that person that goes, I've got this this long range rig, and I do a lot of shooting, and then I'm gonna still take that rifle hunting. Like, to me, this is where that sits, you know. I mean, and I think you could see this in some different professional capacities as well. Extreme versatility here. Talk about this one.
When you had mentioned hybrid on the first go round, in fact, I just put together a young man in the showroom this a couple weeks ago. He got one of those really feature rich rifles that I was talking about, that chassis ultralight construction, barrel ultralight construction, accuracy potential of the system mega high. He spent a lot of money on it, right? And he really wanted as much as he could get out of the system, but did not have a lot left over for what conventionally we would see hung on a rifle of that price tag.
Okay.
And so he was a little nervous, and I understand, because sometimes when you look at a dollar sign on something and you see the number of zeros attached to it, you make an assumption of perceived quality. And he's walking me through what he wants to use it for. He's going to spend the majority of his time on a flat range, ring and steel, out to the cartridge's absolute maximum capability. And it was a flat shooting 6.5. But he also wanted to hunt with it. And he has plans in the very near future for mule deer and pronghorn specifically. And I said, I couldn't even let him finish the sentence. I'm like, this is the optic for you. And he said, really? And I said, yes. So I used the word hybrid to him. And not that we're necessarily marketing it as such, but it is. I said, look at the form factor, look at the dimensions, and compare them to, I used an LHT 3 to 15 as an example. I used a Strike Eagle 5 to 25 as an example. You go, you're getting the best of this system from a magnification range standpoint. Weight, it's heavier, but not terribly. And then also I'm giving you so many useful tools as predominantly a target shooter who is also going to hunt with the same system. And that was his rifle. Like that was, I think he had a 22 he might have mentioned, but that was his gun. And that's what he planned on using. You had mentioned travel range. So this thing has like 150 plus MOA of travel. So we're not talking specifically about 22 LR options, but if you want to squeeze all the juice out of a 22 LR, this is it. There's one of these going to be mounted on my CZ455 before end of week. So I'm very excited about that. But there's more travel in this optic than just about anything else out there, which is super useful for the long-range shooter. I can't say enough about how well this specific optical mechanical system turned out. It is brilliant. It is one of my favorites in our line for exactly those things you talk about. The shooter who will be on that flat range, will be in the field, doesn't have the budget or doesn't want to expend the budget at the level of some of these other optics that we've talked about today. This Strike Eagle 3-18 and the Strike Eagle 5-25 for that matter, if you want more than 18X on the top end. This is a really, really cool scope.
Mm-hmm. Well, and, for me personally, even though we joke about it in past podcasts, and I guess it's kind of a joke, do I edge towards more magnification? Yes, but I still highly value the low end.
Yeah.
And so to me, I look at this and I go, man, low end of 3, high of 18. Generally the scopes that I run top out at 15 for hunting applications. Got a little extra more juice on the top end there.
It's special.
It's just a great scope. And for all the reasons that you're talking about, man, this kid's got one rifle to do it all.
Mm-hmm.
That's a scope that'll do it all.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
On my list here that I started out with, Ryan, and we've covered a lot of these things throughout this conversation, but, cost.
Yep.
Glass, which generally ties right into cost.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
Also, I don't want to simplify glass because optical design, as we talk about many times, is
very vexing process.
Yes, very important. Magnification, that's going to be another primary consideration. The reticle.
Yep.
What are you looking for in a reticle? Is a simple plex reticle going to do it? Do you need to, gas it up a little bit more with a BDC reticle, or do you need something like you might find in a Viper LR or an LHT?
Yeah.
Illumination. That's something that I feel like you did not used to see on a lot of hunting scopes, and now you are seeing it more. Focal plane, what's going to work right for you? What turret system is going to be right for you? If you never plan on dialing, you may not need a scope with those features.
Agreed.
Again, I can argue it the other way, and the person might be like, I don't plan on dialing, but I still want a 3 to 15, Mil versus MOA.
That's a hot debate.
It's going to be something that a person might have to contend with.
So over the past couple of years, Mark, I've noticed you're gravitating towards mils lately,
Mm-hmm.
where you were an HSLR shooter in both 4-16 and 6-24.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's funny that you brought up coos deer hunting.
Yep.
I've only killed 2 coos deer with the rifle. One with the 4-16 at 400 yards, and one with the 6-24 at 525 yards.
Yep. And not that there's anything wrong with MOA. This is an opinion again. This is a podcast loaded with opinions.
Yes.
I will go on record, out loud, publicly, and state that I think MRAD is easier. I think if I have 10 shooters on the line and we're instructing them down at edge, and I give 5 MOA-based systems, and in this context, it's going to be technical turret, technical reticle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Something you're going to dial, manipulate, examine, dissect. And I instill no bias to those shooters. I give them the same treatment from understanding exterior ballistics, inputting it into a calculator, and then leave them to their devices to execute shots at distance. The MRAD shooters will be more comfortable quicker, will pick it up quicker, will implement it quicker. No doubt.
I agree with that. And then I would also say, though, if you're running a rifle scope like, the capped 2 to 10, then it doesn't necessarily matter.
No, and again, that's why I.
So I guess what I didn't want to be like, we overwhelming like MRAD is better, and then a person goes, well.
Oh, so in
I need MRAD for my cap 2 to 10. It's like no,
and that's why I said technical turret, technical reticle. So I have more MOA scopes than I have MRAD scopes.
Right.
But if I'm grabbing a rifle scope that has a turret that is intended to be rapidly manipulated and monkeyed with, and a reticle that's also comprehensive, I'm going MRAD if the option's on the table. And sometimes it isn't. That's just been the case, right? So the predecessor to the Viper HD with the exposed elevation turret, the Viper HSLR, I've got one of those. It pulls double duty on a 300 Weatherby and a smokeless muzzleloader.
And it was
MOA.
Only available in MOA. Yeah.
And that's fine. I'm comfortable with that system. But if the option's on the table, I'm definitely trying to sway that shooter to MRAD. Mm-hmm. It's easier to digest. The reticle, I think, is easier to break down, to find the invisible spaces between spaces, or I should say the not identified spaces between spaces on the reticle. So if you've got a gap, breaking it down with an MRAD optic is typically easier than it is with an MOA scope. And the numbers that you're working on when you're looking at your drop charts, they're just smaller. So I think the brain processes a smaller figure easier than it processes a larger one, even if at the end of that experiment the result is the same. So X amount in MRAD and X amount in MOA to hit a target at a given distance doesn't matter. They do exactly the same thing.
You're just turning it to a number.
Yep. How you get there, I think, is easier in MRAD.
Yeah. And then length and weight.
Yeah.
That's the only. Those are the things.
Yep.
And luckily, we have a pretty deep lineup of rifle scopes.
We've got options.
If you hunt, there's likely something in the Vortex lineup to suit your very particular needs.
Absolutely.
Did we leave anything on the table?
I don't think so, Mark. I don't think so. I could talk about this for 27 hours straight.
Well, we still got a few hours of work left, so you'll probably talk about it for at least the remainder of those.
Yeah, correct. And if you're sitting there and you're looking at that rifle and you're thinking of an adventure, near or far, big or small, and you're like, what is the optimal system? That's why we love this. Just ask. We're happy to tell you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say give us a shout.
Drop us an email.
If you have any further questions after our rambling here, give us a call, and you can run down your exact rifle, your exact hunt, or where you hunt, all the time. Maybe you're doing the same hunt every year. We'll chat through it. All right. Well, thank you, Ryan.
Thank you, Mark.
It's always a pleasure.
It is.
Thanks everybody for listening. And let us know. Let us know if you have any other questions. Shoot us an email. Give us a call. Hit us in the comments on this podcast on the YouTube. And we'll catch you on the next one. And maybe we'll see you in the field with one of these new Viper HDs.
Heck yeah.
You'll see me in the field with one of these.
Same.
Bye, everybody.
See ya.
There you have it, folks. Thank you very much for listening. As usual, give this video a like if you liked it, comment something below, and give us a subscribe to the Vortex Nation podcast channel. It would mean a lot to us. Also, why don't you give us a follow over on Instagram while you're at it, at Vortex Nation Podcast. We'd love to hear from you over there, and we'll keep you updated with all kinds of cool photos and videos from our adventures that we do here. Otherwise, we will see you on the next one. Thank you again. Happy hunting and shooting, everybody. Have a good one.